front end, middleware, and backend. Those three words. If you are missing two of those, which usually are the backend and the middleware because everything is running on the front end, let's change that. I am going to be showing you how we will interact with Alchemy and any other Web3 function that require us to interact with some sensitive information, because I need to be calling the smart contract using a wallet that is stored in the app without storing any sensitive data in the front end. Instead, we'll send everything to the backend, because the backend is meant to be the place where all this very important information is stored and is processed. I am going to make sure in this video that you know how can we integrate Alchemy SDK into the backend. Why we need that? Well, very important. We are going to be interacting with Alchemy SDK. The API key is something that you don't want to store in the front end because you run the risk of compromising the keys, or because the information is being rendered in the user's browser. Not only that, we are going to learn how to build a Web3 application that can scale. We're not talking about hosting the entire application on a single server. You need an application that can sustain multiple concurrent users. As users keep accessing the platform, the data that we need to capture needs to be obtained in real time, so then the user experience is fast, is intuitive, and it brings up the user adoption, because that's what we need. We need to make sure that the users are happy when they navigate into the platform and there's no slowness. The backend is something very important, and it's a must in any dApp that we develop. If we need to make calls into a smart contract, and the only account that can make calls into a particular smart contract is a wallet that has rights into the smart contract, we want to make sure that the private key that is performing the calls to that smart contract is safe, which means that we cannot store that in the web front end. You don't want to do that. Hear me out. Why we need the middleware? All the actions that the user will perform, either buy, sell, any interaction in Web3, will be done with a smart contract, and usually will be sent to the API provider. In this case, we are going to be working with Alchemy's SDK. I had to be interacting with the API key. We want to store that in the backend. Here's where the middleware comes into place. We don't want to open the backend to the outside world, which means that should not send my front end calls to an address that is open to the outside world. That points to the backend. So the backend will be open to receive any API request, but we don't want to open it to the outside world because we run the risk of a cybersecurity breach. But instead, what we can do, and this is what I'm going to teach you in this tutorial, is to build a middleware that will send the request from the front end to the backend. Check this out. I log into that portal, into that application, click a button that is going to do any function. The front end, it's going to send the request to the middleware. The middleware is going to finally send that request on behalf of me, the user, to the backend. I don't have to open the backend to the outside world and interact straight to the backend. You don't want to do that. What you want to do instead is have a middle application that can grab the request from the end user, in this case from me, and send that on my behalf to the backend. We start with Next.js. Let's build the front end, a very straightforward front end. We are going to be building a middleware running in Node.js and Express.js to allow the API interaction from the front end. The front end, all it has to do is send the request to the middleware. There's not going to be any functions in the front end other than sending requests to the middleware. In the middleware, we are going to be creating some API interfaces. I am going to be building URLs that I can point the front end to in order for the middleware to receive those requests. Once we're done with that, check this out. The middleware is going to have a very similar API request function to send that to the backend. You know, I like to add some creativity to the mix. We are going to be adding some ASCII art that will basically show us on the console every time that there was an interaction between the middleware and the backend. Okay, which means that every time that there was an API call, we'll just see that. Let's look at that because we want to know that there's transactions flowing, there's activity going on. We don't want to make this boring, right? We want to show, a little bit of art. Let's do some ASCII art. Let's add as a response. Every time that I send a request to Alchemy, it's just going to show me, hey, responded. The backend is just going to give the information back to the middleware, and we are going to be showing that beautiful ASCII art as well. Let's do that. Let's make it fun. It's not going to take too long, and you are going to know how to leverage Node.js, Express.js, Next.js, and obviously Alchemy. Let's do it. Okay. Let me go ahead and explain to you what we need to do, okay? And how this environment looks like. I am going to draw, all right? So the first thing we are going to be drawing is the front end. Let's assume this is the front end right here, right? So the end goal is to get the front end to communicate to the middleware. We are going to be sending all the API requests to the middleware, so then the middleware can send that to the backend, okay? So with that said, I am going to copy and paste here, okay? So I can show you what we are going to be working with, all right? Type here middleware, backend here. Awesome, okay. Now, what we need to do now, let me just move it here. Okay, so we have an address in the front end. I have a server that is going to be running the front end. I have another server that is going to run the middleware, and finally another that's going to do the backend. So now what I'm going to do, I am going to type the address for my middleware. Remember, the front end, it's going to be public facing, which means that any request is going to come from the internet because a user logged into the front end and accessed the portal or accessed the application, and then they are going to be executing some functions, okay? So this is in the internet, okay? Let's assume this is on the internet. Once we land on this web front end, right, and we execute any call or click a button, we need to send that request to the middleware. This call is just to request to send the request to execute X function. This function, it's a function that will require us to interact with Alchemy, right? But remember, the Alchemy API is being executed or is being queried using the backend because we're protecting that side of the application. We want to make sure that those keys are not compromised, okay? The same goes with Web3 calls into the blockchain. We are going to be executing those calls into the backend, okay? Now I am going to be doing the following. I need to send this API call bound to the backend using the middleware. Now, the end user is not going to talk to the backend directly. Instead, the middleware is going to talk to the backend, okay? So I have two boxes, right? I have two servers that are going to be performing this function. One of them is going to be 1010. I just want you to become familiar with the IP addresses, but again, this is a literally internal infrastructure. The middleware is going to have .31, okay? And the backend is going to be 100. I have to make sure that when I configure the front end, when I code the front end, and I put the URL, I need to be pointing to the middleware. The middleware is going to be running Express. The port that we will be assigning to that instance or to that application is going to be 8081, okay? Which means that the front end, and again, this is internal. Usually when we work with production, we're not going to be pointing to a particular port. We could, right? But usually what we do is we forward that using HTTPS to protect or encrypt that communication with certificates. I'm not going to be discussing that. I could. I'm not going to be discussing the encryption aspect if we want to do SSL. That's literally another video, okay? But for this case, I need to make sure that the front end is pointing to this particular API address along with the port, so then I can access the middleware gateway, okay? This will be the URL that I can ask for the information that I'm looking. Now we have the same approach. Literally the middleware and the backend is going to be configured the same way. We are going to be using Node.js and we are going to be using Express.js. The backend, right? The backend is going to have 8082. We are going to be configuring port 8082, and you are going to see how we are building this entire server so it starts listening, okay? Cool. So once the front end sends that request, I am going to be sending that request on behalf of that user. The middleware should be sending or forwarding that same API request that I just did to the backend, okay? And there we go. Awesome. All right. It's cool. So let's go ahead. I have the front end already built. It's a Next.js instance. I'm going to show you right now. And here we go. So let me show you here. This is the box. I already installed dependencies. One trick that I'm going to give you, if you don't know, every single web instance includes a package.json, or in this case, every Next.js install includes a package.json. This is the server. It's very straightforward. All I did, I'm going to show you the front end screen. Let's run the server. Clear, and let's type npm run dev. Okay, now the server is running. I am going to show you what we are going to do, okay? We are going to code a simple application that is going to show the NFTs held by a particular wallet. So all we are going to do, I am going to be able to paste the wallet address, right? And then if I retrieve the NFTs, I should send that wallet address all the way to the backend. So then Alchemy can provide me that information back. Okay, we are going to be using Alchemy SDK. How can we do this? Let's go ahead and work on it. Okay, now what we need to do, let's go back to the front end, right? When we initialize the front end, there's quite a few dependencies that we have to install. By the way, with the package.json in any instance, you can just type npm I, and anything that is listed under dependencies will be installed. So as a matter of fact, if I want to do it now, I can do it now. I can literally go Control-C and I can type npm I. So what I'm going to be doing, I am just going to be installing all dependencies that I have listed in package.json. So this makes everything easier, okay? And I'm going to be providing, as always, all the files so then you can install this in no time. Okay, cool. So we got everything here. Awesome. So let's run it back. Let's make sure that this is running. Let me just clear the console. Let me npm run dev. And we got the web front end up and running. Cool. Awesome. Now let's go back into the browser. Okay, you can see here everything is looking good. Now here's what we need to start doing. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to show you right now. So this is the HTML code to display the NFTs in the front end. This is the function that we need to make the magic happen. This function, it's going to send the request to the middleware. The middleware is going to send the request to the backend. Right now, all I have is basically a DOM element that will allow me to obtain the value that I'm going to paste, which is going to be the wallet address, and display this on the console that tells me that everything is working fine. Let's make another folder. Okay, so what we are going to do, we're going to right click, we're going to make a new folder, and this folder is going to be called components. Okay, we are building the components folder. Inside the components folder, let's build a file, and this file, we'll call it interfaces. And we know every interface that we list there is going to be configured to send the information to the middleware. Okay, interfaces. JS. Awesome. What we need to do, we just need to use fetch. In Node.js or in Next.js, we have a tool called fetch. With fetch, I can literally make API calls. I can do get, I can do post. So let's go ahead and build a function that we need to export because we are going to import that function under fetch NFTs. Once I get the wallet address, I am going to be sending that value to the interface. So then Next.js can forward that to the middleware. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to type export async function. Okay, and let's call this get alchemy info. Let's type get alchemy info. Cool, awesome. And let's open that function right here. But remember what we need to do. We need to pass the value of the wallet to this function so then we can send that using fetch. What I'm going to do, I am going to go over the fetch NFTs. Now that I created this function, right, I am going to save it because it's already exported. There's nothing, but it's exported. So I can import that and leave this function with that information in, okay? So what I'm going to do, I am going to say constant and let's type NFT data, okay? And we are going to await, and this is when we are going to import that function. We're going to type get Alchemy, there we go, get Alchemy info, press tab, and now you can see that I just imported the function in the index page, okay? Cool. Now I need to pass the value of wallet. So what I'm going to do, I am going to copy whatever information the user gave me in the front end. I am just going to pass that into Alchemy info. I am passing wallet. Cool. All right, I'm going to Control S. Now let's go to interfaces. And I need to make sure that I'm going to bring that value in. Remember, we exported that value. Now we have to import it here. So I'm just going to type wallet. And I know that I am obtaining the wallet address that has been imported from index page, okay? Now what we need to do, let's build a constant. This constant is going to be called the middleware URL, okay? And now we are going to type the address of the middleware, okay? So what we need to do, we are going to say HTTP, and then remember in my drawing, the middleware is 1010, right? This will be when you run and you test it. When you go over the configuration, test it yourself, you make sure that you obviously assign the address of the middleware that you are running the instance, right? I'm going to type that, right? And the port. We mentioned that we were going to use port 8081. Cool. Now we are going to do the following. Pay attention to this, okay? We're going to type constant. Let me move this here so then we have more space. Let me show you better, okay? Cool. We are going to be typing URL, right? But what I'm doing, I am going to be combining this with the value of the path in the API post that the middleware is going to receive. Let me explain, okay? Let's go back. I'm going to show you real quick. I want you to understand this 100%, okay? I need to tell the middleware. Remember, the middleware is going to be receiving calls for many functions. I need to make sure that when I send the call to do something, it lands in the right function that we are going to be configuring in the middleware to forward that to the backend correctly. So with that said, I am going to be retrieving information from Alchemy, okay? Which means that I will be doing a function or at least a path, an API destination labeled call Alchemy, okay? So now I should be expecting, okay, I just did this. So this will be the API path in that middleware. So if we resolve the entire thing, this should be the API path, okay? If I go here, I should land in the middleware in the function that I am expecting to obtain the information that I want, okay? So with that said, we are going to be building this call Alchemy in the middleware that should send that to the backend to the right destination because we're also going to have multiple functions doing different things. We need to make sure that we land in the right destination, okay? So now what I need to do, I am going to append. Remember what I just did? I appended the address to the path, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type middleware plus, and now this will be the value that I want to send my front end to request the information to. There you go. Okay. Now I know that once I land here, I am going to be landing in this particular API destination. Okay. Check this out. And now we are just going to finish that API request. We're going to type options because we need to be sending some attributes to make sure that the information that we will obtain and the call will be successful, okay? So I'm going to say that the method that we will use is a post request, okay? Post will allow me to send a request via API providing a body, meaning that I am going to be sending some information the destination API expects us to be sending, okay? Cool. Okay, so I'm going to say this. Now I am going to pass the body, okay? Here's the fun part. I am going to be sending this with JSON stringify. Let me explain why, okay? What the hell is that all about? Okay, so when I send the data to the API, in this case to Express is expecting me to send this formatted in a particular way, so then it interprets it and obtains the value that it needs, okay? So I need to be formatting this in a JSON format. So what we're going to do, we're going to pass the wallet in a JSON formatted output. So then the Express instance can digest that information and send that properly, okay? So I am going to be sending a wallet, okay? There you go. And as a matter of fact, because this is the only thing that we're sending, I don't even need to press enter or a new space, okay? Press comma, and now I need to send the headers. The headers, right, is basically me telling Express what kind of information am I sending and what should I be expecting. In this case, I am going to tell that the content that I'm sending, content type, it's a application JSON. So this is the data that I am going to be passing onto the middleware, okay? Because we're passing this body in JSON stringify, we are going to tell the middleware it's an application JSON content, okay? Once we're done with that, let's assume we send the information, everything was successful. Okay, once we're done with that, I need to effectively build the API call, okay? Let's go ahead and build that call. Let me type let, and I am going to store whatever I obtain back from the backend. Remember, we will obtain the value from the backend, but the middleware will just send it back to us. The middleware is going to do us the favor to talk to the backend and provide that return of whatever the backend processed. Okay, so we're going to say let response, and we are going to type await fetch. This is the function that I talked to you about. And we are going to say URL. Remember, we build that entire URL path, but then also I'm going to type comma, and I am going to be passing the options. And this is all the values that we need to pass, okay? We're going to type options, and boom, that's your API call, okay? Now, once I obtain that information, I am going to be expecting that response. I need to process that response, and I need to send the values to the front end so then we can obtain what we need, so that we can show the NFT information, okay? What I'm going to say let output. I'm just going to type output, meaning that what I obtain from the backend, and we are going to say await response, and then we will say this is a JSON format response, okay? What this is doing is providing it's going to store the output of whatever we obtain here into here, and this is what we are going to be returning. Okay, cool. And when I say return, this is what the index.js in Next.js, the index file, the index page is going to use to get the information that it needs. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to return output. Beautiful. Now, if I save here and go to index, now the await the information that we are going to obtain and store in NFT data, it's basically the output that we obtain back from the backend, okay? Now here, I can use that and build my call or build the function that is just going to obtain the data and show the NFTs, okay? Awesome, we're good there. All right, now we are effectively done, at least on the API side of the front end. By the way, what you see right now is the only thing that the front end should be doing. That's all. Yeah, we should be, we are going to be formatting the output of NFT data. We probably have to do a for loop so then we can render those individual pictures and show the metadata individually and all that. But as far as calls to the blockchain and do transactions and stuff like that, no, that should not be happening here. It should be happening in the backend. Now let's build the middleware. One thing that I realized that we need to fix, it's on the diagram that I built. So the IP address for the middleware is 33. I made a mistake here. It's 33. I just want you to become familiar with the IP, so then when we start assigning them to the API calls, then you know what I'm referring to, right? So let's build the middleware. How can we go and do this? Okay, I am going to create a folder. Let's call this folder middle, right? Then once we build the folder, brand new folder, what I'm going to do, I am going to either one of two things, install all the dependencies that we need for Node and Express, or build a package JSON that includes all dependencies and I just need to do npm I. With that, it installs everything. Let's do that. So then you know that there's an easier way if you're not familiar with Next.js or Node.js as far as the package JSON, like it's the easiest way to install all dependencies. Like everything is already in the package JSON. When you export a project with the package JSON, you just type npm I and it will install all dependencies. Okay, so let's go. So what I'm going to do here, I am in the project folder. This is the middle folder. So what I'm going to do, I am going to type package JSON, okay? And inside here, we are going to add all the dependencies. I'm going to just copy and paste for sake of the tutorial, so we can go fast, okay? I am going to paste all the dependencies that we are going to be working with, okay? Let's see. Let me zoom in a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, awesome. We are going to be installing dependencies to work with the API request, okay? And this basically makes the middleware an API server. It's going to accept requests from clients. I am going to be adding the body parser, which allows me to format the output in JSON and allows me to send requests and receive requests using the application JSON. I am not too familiar with cookie parser. I have to believe it has to do with the aging in the request, but don't take my word for it. CORS. Okay, so CORS allows me to filter, and it's basically the security mechanism that we can implement in the API call to prevent unauthorized addresses from hitting the application or hitting the service, right? However, there's many ways to implement this. You can go CORS, which I strongly recommend because the middleware is going to be open to the public internet. And you still can use CORS to filter to only accept requests incoming from a particular DNS address or a URL. If you are not including this particular header as part of your request, I am not going to allow you to hit the API. So that's also an extra layer of security. And trust me, if you've been developing for a while, CORS, it's something that never ceases to give us a hard time. It's definitely something that it's worth learning and working with. Obviously, Express, we are going to be working with Express. We are also installing FS. If I need to be interacting with the file system and I need to be doing some file transfers and stuff like that, then I need to have this as well. Molter and Node Fetch. So Node Fetch, it's the API functionality in Node, allows me to do those API calls, okay? So let's go ahead. I am going to Control S. And by the way, this is exactly the same dependencies that we are going to be installing in the backend. This is exactly the same file. So this file, I can literally copy the package JSON, build the folder for the backend, throw it there, npm I, and I am going to have everything installed, okay? So I just Control S. Let's go back into the console, right? And I am going to show you now that we should see that package JSON file. All I have to do now is npm I. With that, it's going to install every dependency that we have listed in the package JSON. Easy, right? Cool, and we're done. Awesome. Now, if I list directories, now I have the log file and I also have the null modules, all the packages, all the libraries, every single file that the modules are going to be using, it basically adds the null module. If I go back here and I'll open my code, now I see the directory with all the data that was associated to the install. Okay, awesome. Let's build the middleware. We are going to be doing two files. We are going to be creating two files, okay? The first file is going to be called middleware.js. This is the file that is going to run the engine, the middleware engine to allow the connectivity to happen. In this file, I am effectively building that node servers that is going to be listening for Express and it's going to be doing that interaction, okay? So I am going to be accepting API requests with middleware.js. I am going to be configuring another file called interfaces. What basically that file is going to do, it's going to list, we are going to be coding all the paths or all the calls that we will be doing to the backend. Remember, the middleware is going to obtain or get those requests from the front end. The middleware is going to forward that to the backend. In interfaces.js, we will actually point all the API path to the backend. So this is where we are going to forward that to the backend using the interfaces.js. By the way, that's the name that I came up with. It's not like you have to do that name, but just for sake of the tutorial. Okay, so we are going to be configuring 2 files. Let's do the first file, middleware.js. Okay, so this is the first file. Second file is going to be interfaces.js. Okay, awesome. This is where we build that middleware. And by the way, the middleware and the backend is very similar. I'm going to say it's the same. Like, it's the same. The only difference will be the interfaces, where in the backend you actually do the calls to Alchemy, and you do all the functions that you need to do as far as the request that came from the front end. Like, that's where all the magic happens. All the functions, all the calls to the blockchain. Every single interaction with an external API, it's going to be done in the backend under the interfaces. Middleware is going to accept the request from the front end. And in the case of the backend is going to accept the request from the middleware. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's build the middleware. First thing that we got to do, we have to start importing the dependencies that we need to be working with in order to build that API server. The first one is going to be called Express. It's slightly different from Next.js, where we do import. In this case, we're not doing import, we're doing const express, we're declaring it, and then we will be pointing the required library or the required module, okay? And what we do is we type require and then open here, and then from here we can invoke express. We'll type express and off we go, okay? Remember, we already installed this with the package JSON, npmi, and we're done. Cool. Next one is going to be what? It's going to be app. Okay. So app is the function that Express will allow me to use to build those post gateway or the post listeners or the get listeners. So all my API listeners will be invoked with app. So app, it's going to invoke Express, and from there we can enable this to be an API server. So what I'm going to do now, I am going to type Express, right? Because we already declared on top, and boom, now we can use app to build those API gateways, so then we can start accepting calls, right? Cool. Okay, now we are going to be importing a couple of other things. So to be a little bit faster, I'm just going to copy and paste, so then we're more efficient in the tutorial. Okay, so I've declared course. Course, basically I invoke course, I need course, and then this will allow me to set the origin for those requests. This is where we specify that I am going to be accepting a particular address to request to this API. If I just set a wildcard, I'm basically accepting anything, okay? So in here is where you define if you need to see a particular header or a particular source address in the origin. That means that only those addresses are going to be able to talk to the middleware, okay? And request to the backend, which is also, it's something that you definitely want to do in case the front end is not interacting with the backend. With that said, let's continue. I am now going to enable the app itself. I am going to turn on Express. We are going to type app. Remember, we invoked app. We declare it here. We associated that to Express. Now I can use the functionality of app. I will be building the API listeners. So this will start listening, okay? We are going to say the first thing that we need to do is we need to specify that we will be using course in Express. So we're going to type course. And then inside course, I got to invoke the options. Remember, we call those options. This is how we declare to use in Express course, and then this will be the information that we are going to pass, okay? And now we are going to be adding the body parser because we need to handle the JSON format. So what I'm going to do, I am going to type require, and then I'm going to type body parser, and then I'm going to say .json, JSON format, and boom. Okay. We are good as far as setting up Express, okay? Now what we need to do, we are going to be calling the post, okay? So we are going to be enabling the post. This is where we are going to start listening for those API requests. Here's very important. This is very, very important. If we go back into the front end, okay? I'm going to show you. If we go back to the front end, let me go to interfaces. If we go back to the interfaces, we mentioned that we will have this path. By the way, we are going to change this because we mentioned that it was 33. Okay, so it's .33. So here, this is the post that I'm going to be expecting to obtain a request in the middleware. So what I need to declare in the middleware is this particular post, okay? So once I hit this address and I say /call Alchemy, I should be receiving that request in the middleware, okay? So what I need to make sure is that here, this is what we need to declare in the middleware so we can start accepting those requests, okay? This is the front end. And this is where we do that magic. So what I'm going to do, I am going to open it here and boom, I'm going to say call Alchemy. This is what the front end is pointing to, this particular post path, okay? And what am I going to do inside here? I am going to be declaring a function because we need to execute a function the moment that gets hit by the request. We are going to start issuing the commands, or we are going to start triggering the commands inside the function, okay? Okay, now what I'm going to do, I am going to be obtaining a request and I am going to be sending a response. Simple. I am going to be sending a request, should be obtaining a request, and I will be responding back with the return, okay? Very simple. I am going to be doing the magic, okay? So the first thing that we need to do when we are going to send this post request, if you remember in the front end, I had to tell, or I had to send some data. In this case, I need to be sending to the middleware my wallet, or the wallet that I want to search the NFTs for, right? So I am going to say wallet, but this is the value that we have passed from the front end when the user pasted that wallet address. We are sending that to this interface, which we configure on the front end. So we pass the value, right? We are obtaining this from HTML, then we are sending that into the interface. The interface is going to pass that, and it's going to send that as an API post request to the middleware because we're pointing ourselves to the middleware, okay? What I have to do, I got to make sure that I bring that data or that element that we send with the API request in the body. Remember, we send in the body JSON stringify wallet. We need to make sure that we get that here. So what I got to do, I got to declare a constant, and let's declare the same name, wallet. Now, remember, we are sending a request, okay? What I going to be sending as a request? I'm gonna type request, that what? That body, that's the body that we're sending, that name of the body, wallet, okay? So if we go back, let me show you. Remember the body? What's the body name? Wallet. Because we're doing JSON stringify, there's going to be a property name associated to wallet, and the property will have the actual value, or the key will have the actual wallet value. That's how we're passing that, okay? Good so far. Awesome. So we have declare, and we should receive that value here. Now we can do something with it, okay? Now what I need to do is the following. I am going to be returning, but I have to declare a promise because I am expecting a response from the backend, right? Which I'm going to say promise. You promise to send that back to me? Okay, awesome. So what I got to do is what? I got to resolve, right? So we are going to be resolving or rejecting that request, okay? And whatever happens, I am going to be executing an action upon that, okay? Now, I obtained the wallet address. I got that information from the front end. Now it landed here. Now we can invoke the interface, okay? So let's build the interface to call the backend so that we can come back here and finalize all this. So then you understand, okay? Let's go to the middleware interfaces. We are going to declare the function that is going to send it to the backend. That's it. As a matter of fact, this is what we need to do. Check this out. You remember interfaces in the front end? Literally the same thing. The only difference, I am not going to declare a function. I am just going to declare a constant. Again, you can do function. So that said, all I have to do here, I am going to declare this to be a constant. It's the same thing because we're just forwarding that same request as another API call to the backend. But in this case, this is the middleware doing that. The front end did it to the middleware. Now we are doing it from the middleware to the backend. Same thing. So we're going to say constant, and this will be, let's label this call Alchemy. Let's call this Alchemy, okay? What I need to be sending, it's the wallet address, which is fine, but this, it's going to be an async call, which means that I got to say this equals async. Cool. Now the difference here is that in the front end, we have fetch. In the middleware and backend, we have node fetch. I need to declare fetch. I have to make sure that I am importing the node fetch. So what I'm going to say constant. I'm going to type fetch. I'm going to say require. And what I'm going to require, node-fetch. There you go. Awesome. So now we can use fetch here. I am sending wallet. Remember, we are going to be sending, and you're going to see that in the middleware. I am going to be sending the wallet value, but now we need to send this to the backend, okay? Which means that I am going to relabel this to be called backend, okay? Let's label this to be backend. We're now working with the middleware, remember. Okay, we said that the backend port was 100 8082. So let's make sure that's the case. So it's 100 8082. Cool. We are going to send whatever we obtain or we got from the front end to the backend using the middleware. Okay, and basically it's going to be calling the backend, and we are also labeling the express post in the backend to be the same name, or else we're not going to be able to reach it. Okay, so we're just going to leave it like that. In the backend, we'll do the same as in the middleware, and we will go from there. Okay, now we're sending the wallet because we're going to pass that, and we're going to say await fetch, URL, options, and yeah, that's about it. That's all we have to do. Okay, so we're going to control S, right? But one thing that I want to do, and we are done with the middleware, I need to be exporting this, okay? So I need to be able to export that so then I can import that here and use it, right? And pass the wallet value, okay? So I got to import that function that we just created here. In Node.js, it's slightly different. So you are not going to type export as we were doing in Next.js. We are just going to type module exports, okay? And then inside here, we are going to say, open the brackets, and then we will invoke that function, okay? Cool. We're going to control S. Now, what I have to do, I am going to go to the middleware, and I got to make sure that I import that. So we are going to be importing that, okay? And the way that we import, it's also different from Next.js. We're not going to be doing that. Remember, we are doing this format. And we can use this to import more functions. If we need to create more API post requests or API listeners, we can continue importing whatever interface we keep adding here, okay? We have to make sure that we exported it, and then we go back, and then we import it right here, okay? So what I got to do now, I am going to say, it's going to be call Alchemy. Okay, that's the name of the interface, call Alchemy. Okay, so we are importing that here, and we are going to say here, guess what? Interfaces. That's the file that includes that function. There we go. I can use that function here. I can say call Alchemy, and I'm going to send inside the function what I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass a wallet. There we go. Awesome. So now we are effectively passing the information that we obtained from the call, from that request that came in. I have to do something, okay? I am going to say, I need to do whatever I obtain from that output. This output right here, it's going to be whatever the backend gave us. Whatever the backend sent back to us when we send this request from the middleware, this will be stored in the output. What we need to do is we have to send that back to the front end, okay? So check this out. This is how we do it. So we're going to open here. We're going to declare that, okay? Remember now, this is the request, right? We just did the request. Now we are going to respond. So we're going to type res, and then this is where we are going to say. The first thing I'm going to say, if this was successful, I am going to reply back with the status code of 200, which is a successful call, okay? And then I'm going to say also respond with what? I am going to place the header. This is how we are going to send the API call back into the front end, right? The response. And we are going to say, this will be content type, okay? And we are going to declare this to be application/JSON, Okay, so we are going to declare that. Another thing that I got to declare is I got to say, right, cache control, because I need to make sure that if I don't obtain any response after a certain period, drop it, because else the middleware is going to sit stuck and then we might crash the app. We need to make sure that we discard if we don't get a response back, drop it, okay? And then we'll set a timeout for that. There we go, cache control. Okay, and then we are going to say the max age. It's basically 180, which is 3 minutes. So after 3 minutes, I am going to discard this request, okay? And finally, this is how we send the data back to the front end. We type end, and then inside end, we are also going to be stringifying that output because we have to respond the same way, okay? We are going to say stringify, and then what are we going to stringify? I'm going to be stringifying the output. Remember, that was what we obtained as the response from the backend. We are sending that back to the front end. Whatever we obtain from the backend, we're sending it back to the front end this way, okay? So whoever called this, we are going to reply back with the data here. That's it. And then I'm going to do the following. I'm just going to handle the error in case there's an error. I want to make sure that I can see that, right? So I'm going to say error, and I'm just going to say console log error so we can handle that, okay? But also, I have to say, by the way, I have to say the following. I am going to respond with a JSON error. Like I am going to say back to the front end, I'm going to tell the front end, hey, no, we were not able to. This is the error. I'm just going to spit that information out to the front end. Also going to be responding with a status of 405. And then this right here allows me to kill the request, right? So if there was an error, I want to end the error, but I also want to respond with 405 status, okay? Which is like, failed, or like was not completed. Once we're done with this, right? By the way, the backend is going to be very quick because it's literally this. The only difference will be the call to Alchemy, but other than that, it's literally the same thing. Okay, it's very simple. Let's finally build the middleware to start listening. We're going to type constant and let's turn on the server. I'm going to declare the server, and this will be basically app listen. And I'm going to be specifying the port. This is the port that we are going to be listening at, 8081. And let's turn on the function to start listening. And inside here, I am going to declare the port. Okay, this port is basically going to call the server, and it's going to get the address. Okay, and we're just going to append port. Okay, this is how we declare that. What I want to show now in the console the port. And what I'm doing right here, I'm declaring that. Give me the port that we declare here, and I can show that, hey, the middleware is active on port XYZ, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say now console log, and inside the console log, we can type a message that says middleware active and listening on port, and then type colon plus port. Port, it's the value, okay? So we should be seeing the port showing in the console, okay? Cool, this is it. I'm gonna Control S. We are calling everything. This is basically how we send that information back to the front end. I'm going to go to interfaces, and yeah, that looks good. Let's see if we don't run into any errors. Let's run it, okay? And clear, and now I'm going to say okay, we got both. And now we're going to type node middleware. Type here. Boom, awesome. Okay, awesome. So the middleware is active and listening. Okay, let's do the backend. Let's go ahead and do the backend very quick, because literally all I have to do is copy and paste, and we're going to be modifying. It's exactly the same thing. Like I mentioned earlier, the interfaces are going to do the actual function. The calls to the blockchain, the calls to Alchemy, everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's navigate to the backend now. Let's build that folder. Let's add the same thing that we did with the middleware, and let's go from there, okay? Now, what I gotta do, and let's navigate to that project folder. Okay, let me go ahead and create a new file. So I'm gonna call this package JSON, okay? And now we are going to install the same thing. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go to the middleware and just copy and paste from there, okay? Let's go to package, let me copy this. I'm gonna copy and we are going to paste right here. Cool, I'm gonna Control S. Now let me open the console and let's install. Okay, now let me type npm I and we should be installing those dependencies. And let me let me do there. Yeah, looking good. There's another dependency that we have to install in the backend, and it's going to be the Alchemy SDK. Let's go ahead. We need to install the Alchemy SDK library, as well as we need to create the Alchemy API account. Let's go ahead and build one. I already got mine. I'm just gonna give you a quick walkthrough and we'll go from there. So when you open your account, you are going to be signing up. Once you sign up, you log in, and then from here, we can go ahead and build our API keys. And once you build the application, you specify what blockchain are you going to be using, and is this going to be working in the mainnet or the testnet, etc. So I already got my app, and let me just go ahead and copy this one right here. I got the key, and you can see this. I am going to be deleting this. And as a matter of fact, you can see that it already provides you the syntax. You just need to copy and paste. And this is what we're going to do. What I'm going to do, I am going to copy settings. I'm not going to be copying the import because we're going to be working with Node.js. Okay, so I'm just going to copy settings. And let's go under the project. Okay, and we are going to create an interface file. Remember in the middleware, we called interface.js. Here is where we are going to be executing those Alchemy API requests. Okay, so what I got to do, I am going to declare the Alchemy function, but then I have to install Alchemy SDK first. So what I got to do, I'm going to just install the SDK. Backend and cool. I'm going to type npm I Alchemy -SDK. Let me go ahead and here and let me check my package JSON. Beautiful. Okay, so we got the Alchemy SDK installed. What I got to do now, I am going to be importing Alchemy SDK into my interfaces so then we can send that call to the Alchemy API. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say constant and let's open the two items that we have to import. It's going to be Alchemy, and we also have to import network, because this is what will tell the network that we are going to be working with. So in this case, if I am going to be working with Matic, the testnet for Mumbai, I can type testnet for Mumbai. If I want to start searching, because what we want to do is we want to search for the NFTs. Let me do the following. I think it's going to be better if I finalize declaring this, right? I'm going to say require, and then we are going to say Alchemy SDK. Now I should be able to browse the networks. Okay, so if I could type network, I'm going to press enter. There you go. Now I have all the networks that I got available in the Alchemy SDK to get the response that I want. So in this case, let's work with the ETH mainnet. Okay, so we are going to be working with the ETH mainnet. We're going to be passing the API key. Awesome, cool. We're going to come back to the interface to finalize the function. Now let's build a new file that will start listening for the backend. So it's going to start listening for the backend request. We mentioned that it's literally the same thing as the middleware, with a little bit of some changes that we have to do, but basically it's the same. So to expedite, I'm going to grab all this, okay? Copy it. Let's go to the back end, because it's going to do the same thing, okay? The only thing that we have to make sure is the port, and not even the port, because this is a completely different server. So I can even use the same port, but because we want to use different ports, and we mentioned that in the beginning of this video, we got 8082, so let's make sure that we're listening 8082 in the backend, okay? So let me go back, and now we are going to be listening for 8082. Let me just close this, okay? Let me go ahead, 8082. Now we're gonna say backend, active, and listening on port, and then the port. Right now, it's basically this one, okay? Cool. And now the post, it's we just have to make sure that we are calling it the same way, right? And remember, now we are going to obtain a call from the middleware. Remember, for security purposes, the middleware should be the only client that should be listening to the backend or should reach the backend. So in the development or the deployment of a middleware backend and frontend environment, I can draw it right now. So from a network perspective, right, we got the front end like right now. So let me just use this to expedite this. What I'm going to do, I am going to do the following from a development or an implementation standpoint. I am going to tell this API call should be from the internet. So it's going to be a public internet, which means that this call is going to be from the public internet because those are our clients accessing the platform, using the features, the functions, the sections, making calls, right? So this is a public request, which means that it lands on the middleware. And what we usually do, I am not going to go into the networking, like deep into networking, but what will happen usually is that this address, which is private, will be translated, will be natted, which is basically network address translation, will be natted from a public address. So in the infrastructure that you deploy this, if you're running your own hosting provider, that means that this private address has been translated from a public address, and we can just type anything as far as a public address, right? I'm not going to go into the details on the networking piece, but I can, but I'm not going to. So usually what you end up doing is you associate this IP address to a domain name. So let's say your domain name is going to be middleware or middle.mymarketplace.io, right? And then basically once you send the call, you point the front end, right, to this address, you need to make a DNS pointer, or in this case, an A record pointer that converts this or points this to your public IP. The public IP, it's going to be translated using a method called NAT. So network address translation, basically what it does, you have a device that is sitting in the outside world facing your network. This is usually the firewall. Once that request comes from the public internet, it comes from the outside world, it lands here because that's the IP that is pointing this DNS name. That DNS name points to that IP. Once it lands to that IP, then it gets a request on the firewall. Then the firewall says, oh yeah, I have a rule that translates that public address to this private address. This is configured in the firewall. This is a destination NAT. Basically, it translates that to that. This is on the network side. However, now this is where the security aspect comes into place. What we need to make sure that we're doing is that between the middleware and the backend, you have a firewall that is going to prevent anything else from talking to the backend. So in this line right here represents a firewall. In this line, there's a policy, there is a rule that says, I am only going to allow this private address 10.10.20.33 to talk to 10.10.20.100, okay? And they could be on different networks, same network. And as long as there's a firewall in between, you can send that request in to the backend as long as it's incoming from this address. That's how we protect the backend from any external calls. The calls will be performed to the middleware, and it's only the middleware, the only server or API requester that can land in the backend. And from the backend, then we go to Alchemy. We'll do all the transactions to Alchemy and everything. But then no one from the public internet can actually hit the backend and access the API. Okay. So this is why we place this. This is basically the very high level networking topology that shows you how the transactions will happen. It's just going to land on the public address. The public address will be translated or forwarded to the private address of the middleware. Middleware will send the request to the backend, but only the middleware. There should be a rule that only allows the middleware IP address to reach this, nothing else. That's done internally in the infrastructure. Okay, cool. So that was my 5-minute networking class, okay? So with that said, we got the backend, right? We are also going to call Alchemy. We are going to be sending that information from the middleware to the backend, okay? And also from the middleware, I am going to be sending the same information wallet, okay? And then we need to make sure that we code this function now on the backend. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, this looks good. I am going to code this now on the backend. And remember, I did exactly the same thing as the middleware. Now we need to make this function in the backend as well. I'm just going to copy this name. And now let's do the magic. First, before we interact with Alchemy, what I'm going to do, I'm going to build a test function. So what I'm going to do, I am still going to label it the same way, but instead of me sending it to Alchemy, I'm going to just test, make sure that we can, see something, or at least get some information. So what I'm going to do, I am going to say Alchemy async. I am going to say, I'm just going to return something. I am going to say return, hey, this is the backend. Okay. I have to obviously export that. So I am going to type module exports. Okay. And then I am going to say the function name, which is called Alchemy. Okay. Right now, we're not going to be talking to Alchemy, but we should be getting this back in the front end, okay? It should go front end middleware, middleware to the backend, and then the backend should reply me back with that response, okay? So with that said, let me Control S, okay? The backend is going to do the actual action, which is kind of cool, okay? Also, I want to make sure that when we receive the request, we see something in the console, okay? So what I'm going to do in the backend, I am going to say console log, and we are going to type request received. I'm going to type this message from the middleware. Remember, the middleware is the only one that can talk to this backend, okay? I'm going to Control S, and that looks good. Everything looks good. 8082 interface, it's saved. We should now in the front end get this. Okay, so we are just going to obtain or store that in a variable, then display that on the console log, and we should see that message in the front end. So with that said, I am going to open the my backend console. I'm going to type node backend, and we are not seeing something module backend JS backend. Cannot find module interfaces. Oh, interfaces, and I typed interface. Yeah, you either have to make sure that you do it the right way or you're not fapping or something, okay? And let me go back. Let's give it a shot one more time. That should be good. Good, awesome. So we are listening. As a matter of fact, let me clean all this and let's type it again. There we go. Okay, the backend is listening for request. When we hit the front end, the button, we should see this message in the console. That means that it was able to talk to it. The middleware was able to send the request. So what I got to do now, I'm going to open the middleware, right? And let's do the same thing. Let's add a console message that request received from the front end on the middleware, so we see it also here. Okay, so when I Control S, let me go back onto the middleware and then type it there. So we are going to say, because remember, this is where we receive the request from the API, and then this is what we're going to do with that request. We just return it right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to console log, and we're going to type request received from front end. Remember, this is the middleware. Cool. Control S. Let's run it again and press clean, and then boom. Now let's go to the front end. Okay, let's make sure the front end is pointing to the right middleware because we changed the IP. So the front end is going to be 32. Okay, now let me open the configuration. This one or this interfaces index. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, it's pointing to 33. 33 is the right one. And 33 is listening. Yeah, 33, 80, 81, right? Cool. Alrighty, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. I am going to retrieve, and let's see if we can catch it live. Let me do this. Got it here, and what I'm going to do, I am going to hit here. Oh, we got an error handling issue. Let's see what it is. Oh, it's pointing to 31. It's not 31, it's 33. Did I saw that correctly? I did, but I did not save it. Now let's try it one more time. Okay. Boom, request received from the front end. Awesome. Okay, now let's see the backend. What happened? Request received from the middleware. Awesome. So middleware got a request from the front end. Backend got request from the middleware. Now, remember what we send on the backend as the return or as the response to that request? We should see this in the front end. So what I'm going to do now, let me go to the front end and let's display the output of the the value as an output. Okay. Interfaces. Yes, this is the one. Remember, we are get Alchemy info, and then we're going to go to index, and we should then display NFT data in the console because that's what's calling the function. So whatever we're returning from the backend, we should see it in the console. Okay. Control S, and let's go back. Let me go here. Let me open the consoles so you can see it. And yep, this is it. Let me show you that. Okay, let me type here, but now I'm going to press F12. Let me minimize this a little bit more. And let me put this here so we can see that live. Okay, let me go here and let's see. Oh, that's awesome. 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 Hey, this is the backend. So the backend has replied successfully to the front end using the middleware. So we got this response from the middleware, not from the backend, from the middleware. Middleware is actually giving us all that information. Okay, awesome. Let's add the Alchemy function. Let's make sure that the Alchemy function works. We're looking very good. And then we'll do the ASCII art. Let's add ASCII so then we can see the beautiful output in the screen. Okay, let's go. Okay, what we're going to do with the Alchemy function is let's obtain the NFTs in a particular wallet. Let's see the NFTs displayed. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to open the backend. Remember, we're now dealing everything in the backend, not in the front end. So this will be done here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I am going to be calling Alchemy, but I have to pass the wallet. Remember, we need to obtain the wallet from the API call. And we are going to say constant Alchemy. Okay, we're going to say new Alchemy. And we are going to pass the settings. Remember, we need to use the Alchemy function and then pass the attributes. This includes the API key and all that. Okay. And now I want to obtain the NFTs minted. So in this case, I'm going to type minted NFTs, right? And then we will say await, because we need to await for that response from Alchemy. And we're going to say Alchemy dot NFT. This is literally part of the SDK. Get NFTs for owner, okay? And then we are going to pass the wallet address because that's the owner that we want to see the NFTs. Now what we need to return, minted NFTs. This will give us the result, okay? And this is the result that the front end is going to obtain because the middleware is going to send back, okay? Control S. When we do changes in the backend of middleware, we have to stop it and restart it, okay? Now it's active. Now it's running with this. Let's go ahead and test. Let me go under the browser. Let me find a wallet address real quick. And from here, and any wallet will do. Okay, this wallet. And let me see this. Let me copy this one. And now let me go to my portal and paste the wallet and see what happens. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And yeah, we got it. We definitely got it. Oh, you know why? You know why it's actually showing this in the console? Because that's what we were passing back. Yeah, we're actually getting the response back. That's awesome. Okay, so in order for us to see it, I got to do a config, and it will display that. I have to modify the function in the front end. But you can see it. We got the data delivered back to us. Okay, cool. Let's do that real quick. I just have copy and paste. I have amazing videos that I can show you how to do what I'm going to do in the front end, right? Which is basically displaying the NFTs and all that. This is not, I'm not going to be discussing or covering this on this tutorial, but you got the idea. We already did what we need to do is learn how to get information and send data using the backend or process the entire app in the backend. The front end should only be receiving data. That's it. Okay. Sending requests and receiving data. That's it. Nothing else. So what I'm going to do now, let me find that copy, and we are going to paste right here. Index, and we got NFTs, get NFTs, and then I'm going to remember this is why we were getting NFT data, because I just display that on the console. But now I'm just going to provide this entire function to render, and get the images, get everything, and we should start seeing stuff here. So fetch NFTs, now wallet, NFT data, own NFTs, and this now points to get NFTs. Now I got to pass NFTs. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that that is what's been passed, and it is here. I think I'm missing an extra. There you go. I think I got an extra bracket. So yeah, we should be good. Okay, let me Control S. Let's go back. And let me copy the address. Let me refresh, paste it, and boom. There you go. Beautiful. Awesome. Alrighty. There you go. It's not running in the front end as far as Alchemy. It's running in the back end, and we are getting all this information through the middleware. Awesome. To finalize, let's add some ASCII art. So let me add one that I already got. By the way, I have a couple of sites that I use to generate ASCII art. This is one of them. Just type whatever you want and then copy the thing, and you throw that on the console and make it look pretty, okay? So in order for me to do that, I am going to go to the backend. Let's do the middleware first, okay? So what I want to do, I'm going to be declaring some variables. I'm going to call this constant, and I'm going to say net to def, because this will be the logo, right? And we are going to add this right here. And inside here, we can add that ASCII data, okay? Or ASCII art. So with that said, and just paste this whole thing. Awesome. So we're going to add net to def, and because this is a middleware, let's create another ASCII art. Let's call this middleware. Okay, and let's find something that is cool. And this works. And let me go back. And I'm gonna say now constant middleware. Open here. And this is all not formatted, but we're gonna fix it. There we go, middleware. Okay, now let me just let me show this when we run the app, when we run the middleware. So what I gotta do, I got to make sure that I paste this console log right below here. Console log, we're gonna say net to def, and another console log that says middleware. There we go. I'm gonna Control S, and now if we go back to the middleware, and let's cancel this clear, and let's do it again. You like that, huh? That's looking good. Let's do the backend, and off we go. Let me go to the backend. Now we're gonna open right here, interfaces. This is the backend. Now what I want to pass the same logo, but now we're gonna pass the Alchemy logo as well. I just have like one generated here. This is cool, right? You gotta make stuff that stands out. Be unique. Okay, so this is the backend, and I just generated that Alchemy logo. In ASCII, I did this called backend, net to def, Alchemy. I am going to send two outputs. I am going to show when we run the backend, I'm going to show the same, net to def backend, but then when a Alchemy call has been done, I want to show Alchemy and the logo. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I am going to say console log net to def, and then I say console log backend. Those are the logos for the start of the app. the Alchemy response, I want to show the Alchemy logo. So I'm going to say console log. I can do it inside here because this is where we are going to send the response back. I'm going to say console log, and I'm going to say Alchemy, Alch logo. There you go. And we are going to type below console log, and this will be the Alchemy, what's the name of it? Alch logo is this, and symbol. Let me put the symbol on top and then the logo below. So I'm going to say Alch logo, and then I'm going to say symbol right here. Okay, and we are done. Control S. And let me stop the app. Restart the app. And there you go. You see the backend. Awesome. And middleware is up and running. Let's test it out. Let's test it out again. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to type here. There we go. And let's refresh. And let's find another address. So let's use the same one. Okay. And add here. And boom, there we go. Boom, awesome. Alrighty. Yeah, it was not all the way down, but now it is. Okay. So now we got request received from the front end, and now we are sending, request received in the middleware, and we can say, response, Alchemy response back in the console log and whatnot. Okay. Now we have the three main critical components of the web application. We got the backend, we got the front end, and we got the middleware. If we go back, boom, you're gonna see this, modifying, boom, there you go, awesome. There you have it. Make sure that you apply this in production. You now know how to not only deploy the front end, now you can deploy the middleware, and now you can deploy the backend. Now you know what you need to do to make your application fully scalable without running the risk of compromising any sensitive information that we store inside the application. So that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed and learned everything end to end. If you like my content, you know what to do. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to. Hey, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.